We come to the story of the first woman who died in the Hatfield and McCoy feud. Who was this unnamed woman? Did this event really happen? Did Tolbert McCoy have 3 wives? We will discuss the topic of multiple marriages within the Appalachian culture and how these families could be organized. Then, we will go on the chase of which woman took to her bed and died of a broken heart over Tolbert McCoy. All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine for our flight back in time, but it convinces the YouTube algorithm that we need a bigger vehicle to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. The reading of the article. First, we will read this section of the article as written in The Sun on October 7, 1888. Quote, Chapter 4, Died of a Broken Heart. Talbert's widow was left with quite a little property for a mountaineer's wife. Tolbert was a timber dealer as well as a farmer and had quite an interest in rafts of logs. His widow, quote, was rascaled out of a heap of it, unquote, as Floyd McCoy said by Talbert's partner. But she still had enough to make her comfortable and provide for the girl baby. In a land where the comforts of life consist of, quote, corn pone and bacon, unquote, and the luxuries of hot biscuits and honey. But the unfortunate widow was not to be comforted by any inheritance. She had been a happy, hearty, handsome wife, according to the accounts of friend and foe. But the grave had not closed over her dead husband before she, quote, began to look puny, unquote. She wept less than her mother-in-law, with whom she had to live. She would even, when the old lady would stop her work to clasp her hands and fall on the floor and cry aloud over the fate of her sons, soothe and comfort her instead of weeping too. But she could not sleep at night because the roar of those guns was ever in her ears. And from day to day she was less able to do the work required of a woman on a farm. Eventually she was unable to leave her bed and finally died, literally of a broken heart. But while the McCoys, if in any way affected, were simply cowed by the murder of the 3 boys, the Hatfields were incited to further deeds, unquote. We try to run down which wife this was. Tolbert McCoy supposedly had 3 wives by the name of Mary Butcher McCoy, Cora Nunnery McCoy, and Misty McCoy. We will get into whether or not he had secondary wives later on. But first, we need to explain mountain polygamy and the details of some family living arrangements. Mountain polygamy. If you are a descendant from one of the first settlers into the Appalachian Mountains, don't be shocked if you come across something very odd when it comes to genealogy. It really is not that uncommon to find men who had several wives, concubines, or girlfriends from 1865 through 1900 and sometimes later in time. It is a well-known fact, but not looked upon very lightly. But how and why did it happen? To understand this, when people who speak about the American Civil War, there is a well-known common phrase, brother against brother. The truth of these words were spoken about the men who fought in the Civil War than in the Appalachian Mountains of Kentucky, Western Virginia, Tennessee, and West Virginia. It was pretty common to be on a different side of the war than your actual blood brother. And when the fighting was over, families were often devastated, with one or more of a generation of men no longer walking the face of the earth. In some cases, only the women were left with their husbands, brothers, uncles, fathers, and sometimes sons fighting in the war and to never return home. So, the very few men that did survive and came back to their homes in the Appalachian Mountains were met with a huge surprise. They were now highly sought over. Something had to be done so that the women would not start their own feuds over a man. These women were in dire economic straits, so a kind of uneasy truce was made. A man would have multiple women and families, and this would be overlooked. Several different family structures. The polygamy question had a different way of working out for different families. In all of these cases, the women knew about each other, and they understood the terms and conditions of the arrangements. The most common agreement was the secondary wives would have their own cabins on a farm and keep their own houses. But they had to defer to the rules of the first wife concerning child raising, education, and, of course, time spent with the man in question. This situation did not always work out, though, as the headstrong Appalachian women were working out their pecking order in the families. In those cases, the secondary wife would then be moved into a next situation we will discuss. The next situation of polygamy is where the man would set up a cabin a couple of miles down the road. These women were often secondary wives, concubines, or girlfriends, kind of dependent on how serious the coupling of the two people were involved with each other. In many of these cases, even though they knew that the man had a wife, and for whatever reason they could not get along in the same household, the man would set them up far enough apart so they could all get along. Sometimes it was a matter of the man sticking around long enough to impregnate the woman. In these cases, the widow had no children by the man who had died. Then, the man that she was now going to be, quote, married to, unquote, would lend financial support of that woman and child, so that the man who was killed could still have a family that went on through time. Then you had cases where the women could not get along even in the same county. There were cases where the man would have one family in one county or state and walk over to the next county or state to have a second family. The man would simply spend a month with the first wife, cross over the border, and spend a month with the second wife. The famous men of these cases we have already come across: Valentine Hatfield, Clabe Jones, John Wesley Badjohn Wright, and possibly Tolbert McCoy, and many others. Dying of a broken heart. There is such a thing as broken heart syndrome. Some people call it grieving yourself to death. Death is not always the end to the syndrome. It is where a situation is so tragic and the effects of it are so devastating that your heart reacts to it. The effects are often temporary, but people can suffer with it for the rest of their lives or can actually die from it if it's severe enough. We have also seen this happen in the Hatfield and McCoy feud with the death of Rosanna McCoy. So, this part of the story is plausible. I have listed a website in the description box if you want to find out more information from the Mayo Clinic about the broken heart syndrome. Back to Tolbert's wife, Mary Butcher McCoy. First, let's trace down the important dates of each woman as we could find them. According to the sources listed down below, Mary Butcher McCoy was Tolbert's first wife, or lead wife, or legal wife. We know this because she is the only wife with a legal date of marriage. She is always listed first, and even on his gravesite page. Mary Butcher was born in 1860 to 1863 in Pike County, Kentucky. She married Tolbert on March 3, 1881 in Pike County. They had 2 children together, Melvin and Cora McCoy. Now, what is interesting about Mary is that she doesn't have a death listed. We also have no date of divorce if one existed. But we have found a report on her daughter Cora McCoy's Find a Grave website describing the night of the burning of the McCoy home. It reads, quote, Report of the Adjutant General of Kentucky, Frankfort, Kentucky, February 6, 1888. And 2 children of Tolbert McCoy, a boy about 7 years old and a little hunchback girl about 5, where they remained till the neighbors arrived about daylight. The heroic girl had her feet badly frostbitten, from which she had not yet recovered, and she could not avoid weeping freely as the old lady detailed to me in her presence the horrors of that terrible night. The little boy, too, is worthy of special mention, for when he emerged from the burning dwelling, when it was almost ready to fall, he thought of his little crippled sister, who was still in the house, and he re-entered it and again came forth, leading her by the hand, nor did he even cry during the whole of the battle." Unquote. So, where was Mary? Why were the children of Tolbert at the home of Randolph McCoy the night that the cabin was burned down? Even more interesting, when she died, why didn't the McCoys bury her near Tolbert? There is no grave marked for Mary McCoy at the McCoy Family Cemetery in Pike County, Kentucky. We could not find a cause of death either. So, could it be that Mary McCoy did die of a broken heart shortly after Tolbert's death? We simply do not have the facts at this time to say whether or not she was the lady that the Sun's article was speaking of. Tolbert's supposed secondary wives, Cora, Nunnery, and Misty. This is the information that we could find concerning Cora Nunnery McCoy. Cora lived sometime in the years 1895 through 1983 in Floyd County, Kentucky. She was the mother of Luther McCoy, Neely McCoy, Cornelius W. McCoy, Tolbert McCoy Jr., Mabel McCoy Maynard, William Henry McCoy, Veda McCoy Elkins, and Thomas Burley McCoy. Her life does not match the life of Tolbert McCoy that we are speaking about. We can understand, however, how the mix-up happened. When you have a family in a small area that several people have the same names, it is very easy to get them all mixed up, especially when you have two people named Cora. We had this problem when we were chasing down Jane Mullins Belcher in the Killing Rock story. In her case, there were multiple Jane Mullinses in the same area in the same time period. In the case of Cora McCoy and Cora Nunnery McCoy, they were two separate people from two separate families. Cora McCoy, the daughter of Tolbert McCoy and Mary Belcher McCoy, died in 1888 from a fall. Cora Nunnery McCoy died in 1983 at the age of 87 years old. The Tolbert McCoy she was married to died in Pike County, Kentucky at the age of 77 years old on April 10, 1966. Now, we move on to Misty McCoy. There is not very much information out there about Misty. All we currently know is that she was born between 1824 and 1884. She is listed as the wife of Tolbert McCoy. And that is it. We have no other listing of children, date of their union, or any other information. Until more information comes out about Misty McCoy, we can safely say that we have no idea about her. Was she a secondary wife? We cannot say. But someone has listed her and Cora Nunnery McCoy as secondary wives to Tolbert McCoy on these web pages. Our conclusions. We simply cannot say if the article in the Sun is correct or not about this situation. It is plausible that Tolbert had multiple wives, as this would be in keeping with the time period and the culture that was going on in the mountains after the Civil War. But on the other hand, we cannot slip Cora Nunnery McCoy nor Misty McCoy into those slots either. In the case of Cora Nunnery, she was married to the wrong Tolbert. In the case of Misty, there was not enough information about who she was to definitively say that she was or was not Tolbert's wife. All we can really say about this is that Mary Butcher McCoy can be proven to be Tolbert's wife. We have the date of her marriage to him, but we have no death listed, so we cannot say if the Sun has this story correct or not. However, if the story is true, it would give us the other woman who died during the feud. But on the other hand, the two women counted as casualties of the feud could be Sarah McCoy and Alifair McCoy. And the story of Mary Belcher McCoy's passing could simply be a piece of feud fiction. Thank you. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the myths and truths of the Hatfield and McCoy feud. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification button. Be sure to double check that you are subscribed, as some of our viewers are finding that they are no longer subscribed to our channel. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.